Mary Thompson stood at the entrance of a small church on her wedding morning, her white dress brushing the stone steps as whispers spread through the waiting crowd. The organ music had already started inside, but the doors remained closed. Her father, Mr. Thompson, stood directly in front of her, blocking the way. His face was firm and unyielding. "You will not walk in with that man," he said, staring at Theo beside her. Mary's voice shook. "Father, this is my wedding day," he replied coldly. "Then walk alone. You are no longer my daughter in this moment." A heavy silence fell across everyone watching. Mary slowly released his arm, her hands trembling. Before anyone could speak, movement came from behind the crowd. A man stepped forward, Uncle Eli, the brother Mr. Thompson had not spoken to in 30 years. Gasps spread as the past returned without warning. Mary Thompson had built a quiet life far from the farm, working as a hospice nurse in a town 2 hours away. She spent her days with dying patients, learning what people regret most, not what they said, but what they hid. "Truth gets heavier when it is buried," she once told a colleague. She rarely spoke about her family. Her father, Mr. Thompson, was known for discipline and pride, a man who believed silence kept order. Her mother lived carefully between peace and fear, always warning Mary not to provoke him. Her brother Daniel stayed on the farm, focused on expanding land and equipment. Then there was Theo, a gentle veterinarian who treated animals like they mattered. Mary loved him for his calm presence. But she knew bringing him home would test everything she had ever tried to keep balanced. When Mary first brought Theo to meet her family, the farmhouse felt colder than she remembered. Her mother greeted him politely but nervously, while her father studied him like a man inspecting something uncertain. "Where are you really from?" Mr. Thompson asked during dinner. Theo answered calmly, showing respect without showing fear. Midway through the meal, Daniel rushed in with news that one of his cattle had collapsed outside. Without hesitation, Theo asked to help. He followed Daniel to the barn, checked the animal, and stabilized it. When he returned, his hands smelled of hay, but his expression remained calm. Daniel was surprised, yet said nothing. Mr. Thompson stayed silent through it all. Later, at the sink, he finally spoke. "You can handle animals," he said, "but that doesn't mean you understand family." Mary felt the weight of his words settle deep inside her chest. At the hospice center, Mary cared for an elderly man named Musa, a retired land officer who once recorded property ownership for the district. He was weak in body but sharp in memory. One afternoon, he studied her face and said, "You are Mr. Thompson's daughter." Mary paused. "Yes," she replied. He nodded slowly. "I remember your family's land. There were 2 brothers. Something happened that should not have happened." Mary asked what he meant. Musa looked toward the window. "Your grandmother came to my office. She wanted the land shared equally. She signed everything clearly." He coughed, then continued, "But papers appeared after she became ill. One brother lost what he was meant to inherit." Mary felt uneasy. "Are you saying it was changed?" Musa only said, "Truth is often kept in files, not in memories." His words stayed with her long after she left. Mary returned to her parents' home evening to announce her engagement to Theo. The farmhouse felt tense the moment she walked in. Mother warned her not to upset Father, but Mary spoke anyway. "I am getting married," she said. The room went silent. Father placed his cup down and asked, "To that man?" Mary nodded. Daniel avoided eyes. Mother whispered, but Mr. Thompson stood up. "You will not bring him into this family," he said. Mary felt heart tighten but kept voice steady. "He is already part of my life," she replied. Father stepped closer. "Then you will walk alone," he said. "Think about what you are doing to this family." Mary looked at him for a long moment and finally said, "Then I will walk." That night, she called Theo, knowing nothing would be the same again. After leaving her parents' home, Mary sat in her car for a long time, staring at the dark road ahead. Theo's message came through shortly after, "We'll face it together." His calmness steadied her, but her mind was unsettled. Something about her father's reaction felt heavier than simple rejection. It felt practiced, like a story he had repeated for years. That night, Mary could not sleep. She kept hearing Elder Moose's words about papers that should not exist. She opened her old storage box and pulled out the photo of the white oak tree again. For the first time, she studied it closely. The man beside the tree looked familiar in a way she had never allowed herself to question. A thought formed quietly in her mind. Her family history might not be complete. The next morning at the hospice center, Mary returned to Elder Moose's room, hoping he might clarify what he had told her. He was weaker now, but still aware. "You came back," he said softly. Mary nodded. "I need to understand what you meant." Musa sighed. "Your father's name carries authority in the county," he said. "But authority can be used to shape records, not just manage them." Mary leaned forward. "Are you saying something was changed on purpose?" Musa hesitated. "I am saying I saw what I saw. A will that said one thing. A file that became something else." He closed his eyes briefly. "And I signed what I was told to sign." Mary felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. Nothing in her life had prepared her for this kind of truth. That evening, Mary met Theo at a small diner outside town. The place was quiet, filled with the smell of coffee and fried food. Theo noticed her silence immediately. "You've been thinking too much again," he said gently. Mary exhaled. "My family is not what I thought it was." Theo reached across the table and held her hand. "Most families aren't," he replied. She told him everything: Elder Musa, the land records, the uncertainty growing inside her. Theo listened without interrupting. When she finished, he asked one question. "What do you want to do with the truth if you find it?" Mary hesitated. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. Theo nodded. "Then we take it one step at a time. No rushing. No breaking yourself for answers." For the first time that day, Mary felt grounded. 2 days later, Mary received a call from her uncle Eli. His voice was calm but heavy with years of silence. "I heard you spoke to someone at the hospice," he said. Mary froze. "How do you know that?" she asked. Eli sighed. "Small towns don't keep secrets, Mary. They just delay them." He paused. "There are things about your father and me you were never told." Mary stepped outside into the cool air. "Then tell me," she said. Eli hesitated before answering. "Not over the phone," he said. "Come see me." Before ending the call, he added, "And bring an open mind, not loyalty." The line went dead. Mary stood still, realizing this was no longer just about her wedding. It was about everything she had been raised to believe. That weekend, Mary drove to Eli's home with Theo beside her. The countryside stretched quietly around them, but the atmosphere inside the car felt tense. Theo kept his eyes on the road. "Whatever this is," he said, "we'll handle it carefully." Mary nodded, but her hands were shaking slightly. When they arrived, Eli's house stood calm and solid, surrounded by tall trees and open land. Eli was waiting on the porch. He looked older than Mary remembered, but his eyes were steady. "You came," he said simply. Mary stepped forward. "I need to know the truth," she replied. Eli studied her for a long moment, then said, "Then you better sit down. Because once I start, there's no unhearing it." Inside Eli's house, the air felt different. Slower, heavier, like time itself was refusing to rush. Mary sat on the edge of a wooden chair while Theo stayed slightly behind her, observing quietly. Eli placed a worn folder on the table without saying a word at first. Then he spoke. "Your father will never tell you this part," he said. Mary's heart tightened. "Then tell me," she replied. Eli opened the folder slowly, revealing faded documents. "Your grandmother Vera left instructions," he said. "Clear ones. The land was meant to be shared equally between me and your father." Mary leaned forward, confused. "Then what happened?" Eli's jaw tightened. "Your father changed what came after she became ill. Not alone, but with pressure from people who wanted peace more than truth." Mary stared at the documents as Eli slid them closer. Her name appeared nowhere, yet everything inside them explained the strange gaps in her family history. "I don't understand," she whispered. Eli sighed deeply. "When people control land, they control memory," he said. Theo finally spoke from behind her. "Are these legal records?" Eli nodded. "Copies of originals. What was filed, what was changed, and what was quietly accepted because nobody wanted conflict." Mary felt her breath shorten. "So my father took it?" she asked. Eli did not answer immediately. Instead, he said, "Your father believed he was protecting the family. But protection and control often look the same from the inside." Mary sat back, overwhelmed, realizing this was no simple misunderstanding. It was a long silence built into law. Eli leaned back in his chair, his voice lowering. "There's something else you need to understand," he said. Mary looked up quickly. "What now?" Eli paused. "Your grandmother tried to correct it before she died. She went directly to the county recorder's office. She asked for the land to be reviewed again." Mary felt a sudden shift inside her chest. "Did it happen?" she asked. Eli shook his head slowly. "The request was recorded, but not acted on. I was there that day. I should have pushed harder." His voice tightened with regret. Theo placed a hand lightly on Mary's shoulder as she struggled to process everything. "So it was never settled properly?" she asked. Eli replied, "No. It was left buried. And buried things don't stay quiet forever." Outside, wind moved through the trees, brushing against the windows like a warning. Mary stood up and walked toward the porch, trying to steady herself. Theo followed silently. "This changes everything," she said quietly. Theo nodded. "It changes your understanding, not your life direction," he replied. Mary turned to him. "That's easy for you to say." Theo didn't argue. "I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's not the end of you." Inside, Eli was still seated, watching them through the glass. When Mary returned, he spoke again. "There's a reason I stayed away all these years," he said. "Truth doesn't just break families. It reshapes them." Mary asked softly, "Is my father dangerous?" Eli hesitated. "Not dangerous," he said, "but powerful enough that truth has always been something he managed, not shared." That night, Mary and Theo stayed in Eli's guest room. Sleep did not come easily. Mary lay awake listening to the old house settle around them. At some point, Theo spoke in the dark. "Whatever you decide to do with this, don't do it alone inside your head," he said. Mary turned toward him. "What if the truth destroys everything?" Theo answered calmly, "Then it wasn't strong enough to hold you in the first place." Mary closed her eyes, but her mind kept returning to one image, the white oak tree from the photo. She suddenly understood it was not just a tree. It was a marker of something buried. And by morning, she knew one thing for certain. She was no longer just preparing for a wedding. She was walking into a history that had never been fully told. Morning came slowly at Eli's house, with pale light filtering through the trees. Mary barely slept, but her thoughts were sharper now, no longer scattered by confusion. At breakfast, Eli placed a folded note beside her cup. "We're going to the county office today," he said. Mary looked up. "Why?" Eli replied, "Because understanding truth isn't enough. It has to be placed where it cannot be ignored." Theo stayed quiet, but Mary could see he was alert to the shift in Eli's tone. This was no longer explanation. It was movement. Mary asked, "What happens after that?" Eli answered calmly, "Then your father will have to respond to something he cannot quietly bury." Mary felt a knot tighten in her stomach, realizing the past was no longer staying in the past. At the county records office, the air felt colder than Mary expected. Filing cabinets lined the walls, holding decades of decisions that shaped families like hers. Eli led her to a small office where a woman in glasses reviewed documents without emotion. "Sandra Ortiz," Eli said quietly. "She's the one who handles historical land records disputes." Sandra looked up, calm and precise. "I've reviewed partial files," she said. "But I need full confirmation before anything moves forward legally." She glanced at Mary. "Are you prepared for what might surface?" Mary hesitated. Theo answered gently, "She just needs the truth." Sandra nodded. Truth is not always a single document. Sometimes it is a pattern. She opened a file marked with Mary's family name, and everything in the room shifted. Sandra spread several documents across the table. "This," she said, pointing, "is the original land division request signed by your grandmother." Then she placed another sheet beside it. "And this is the transfer filed weeks later." Mary noticed the difference immediately. The handwriting, the timing, the signatures that did not align in feeling or circumstance. Eli's voice grew heavier. "Your father brought this forward," he said. "But not alone." Mary looked up sharply. "Who else?" Sandra answered carefully. "There were witnesses listed who benefited from the outcome." Mary felt her breath tighten. "So this wasn't just family pressure," she said. Eli nodded. It was influence, timing, and silence working together. Theo stood beside her, steady but serious. Mary realized this was no longer just a family conflict. It was a structured decision that reshaped ownership. Outside the office, Mary leaned against the courthouse wall, trying to steady herself. The weight of everything felt heavier in daylight. Theo stood beside her quietly. "You don't have to rush into anything," he said. Mary shook her head. "It's already in motion," she replied. Her phone vibrated suddenly. It was her mother. Mary hesitated, then answered. Her mother's voice was low, strained. "Mary, please listen to me," she said. "Your father is already hearing things. People are talking." Mary closed her eyes. "Then maybe they should," she replied softly. Her mother paused. "You don't understand what this will do to him," she said. Mary answered carefully, "I think I'm starting to understand what was done before I was ever born into it." The line went silent. That evening, Eli gathered them in the living room. "We are close to a decision point," he said. Mary sat forward. "What decision?" Eli replied, "Whether this becomes private truth or public record." Theo looked at Mary. "That means your wedding is still coming," he said. Mary nodded slowly. "But it won't be simple anymore." Eli continued, "Your father will not remain silent once legal steps begin. He will respond in the only way he knows: control." Mary felt her chest tighten again. "And if I proceed?" she asked. Eli met her eyes. "Then you walk into that church knowing exactly what stands behind you." The room fell quiet. Mary understood clearly now. The wedding was no longer just a ceremony. It was becoming the moment everything hidden would be forced into the open. The next morning, Mary woke up before dawn, unable to shake the feeling that time was tightening around her. Eli was already outside, standing near the porch, watching the fields as if measuring something invisible. "Today we prepare everything," he said when she stepped out. Mary frowned. "Prepare for what exactly?" Eli turned to her. "For the moment the past stops hiding." Theo joined them shortly after, carrying a small notebook. "If this is going public," he said carefully, "we need to make sure every detail is accurate." Mary nodded, though her stomach twisted. She was no longer just a daughter or a bride-to-be. She was now standing at the edge of something that would not allow neutrality. Every step forward meant something would break. Later that day, Sandra Ortiz called Eli and asked them to return to the county office. When they arrived, she looked more serious than before. "I've confirmed additional records," she said, sliding another file forward. Mary opened it slowly. Inside were handwritten notes tied to the original land documents. One line stood out clearly: "Final approval processed under family pressure agreement." Mary looked up immediately. "What does that mean?" Sandra answered, "It suggests influence was acknowledged, but not challenged at the time." Eli's face tightened. "So it was seen and ignored," he said quietly. Sandra nodded. That is often how these cases survive for decades. Theo exhaled slowly. Then the system didn't fail, he said. It chose not to act. The room went silent again. As they left the office, Mary's phone began ringing repeatedly. This time it was her brother Daniel. She hesitated before answering. His voice was tense, almost desperate. "Mary, what are you doing?" he asked immediately. Mary replied carefully, "I'm trying to understand what happened." Daniel lowered his voice. "You're opening something that will destroy everything we've built," he said. Mary paused. "Or finally explain how it was built," she replied. Daniel sighed sharply. "You don't understand the financial exposure," he said. "If this goes further, the farm loans, the expansion, all of it will be questioned." Mary felt the pressure in his words. "So this isn't just about truth for you," she said softly. Daniel didn't deny it. "I'm asking you to stop before it's too late," he said. Then the call ended. That evening, Eli sat with Mary and Theo in silence for a long time before speaking. "There's something you need to know about your father," he said. Mary looked up. Eli continued. "He didn't start this alone. He was young when your grandmother was sick. Decisions were made quickly, and some were pushed harder than others." Mary frowned. "So you're saying he was influenced?" Eli nodded slowly. "Yes. But he still signed his name." Theo leaned forward. "That matters legally," he said. Eli agreed. "It matters morally too." Mary felt torn in two directions, understanding how something could happen and still knowing it did happen. "So what am I supposed to do with that?" she asked. Eli answered softly, "Decide whether truth requires punishment or acknowledgement." That night, Mary stepped outside alone. The countryside was silent except for distant wind moving through crops. She thought about her father, her brother, and the life she had always known. Then she thought about Theo standing beside her through every uncertainty, never forcing her direction. She whispered to herself, "What is the cost of truth?" Theo appeared behind her quietly. "Whatever you decide," he said, "don't lose yourself inside it." Mary turned to him. "What if I already have?" she asked. Theo shook his head. "Then we find you again, step by step." Mary looked toward the dark horizon. She understood clearly now. The wedding was no longer just a personal decision. It had become the moment where everything her family built on silence would either stand, or finally collapse into daylight. The next morning, Mary received a formal message from Sandra Ortiz requesting one final review meeting before anything moved forward legally. "This is the last stage before filing," Sandra had written. Mary sat at the table staring at the message while Theo poured her tea. "Once we enter this phase," he said carefully, "there's no quiet way back." Mary nodded. "I know," she replied. Eli arrived shortly after, placing a folded document on the table. "This is the notice draft," he said. "If filed, it will require your father to respond publicly." Mary looked at the paper but didn't touch it. The weight of it felt heavier than ink. "So this is the point of no return," she said. Eli answered quietly, "Yes." Mary drove alone to the edge of the farm later that afternoon, unable to stay still. The land looked unchanged, fields stretching wide, fences steady, everything appearing normal on the surface. But nothing felt normal anymore. Daniel was outside near the equipment shed when he saw her. He walked over immediately. "You're really doing this?" he asked. Mary looked at him calmly. "I'm trying to understand what already happened," she replied. Daniel shook his head. "You're tearing the family apart," he said. Mary's voice stayed low. "No," she said. "I think I'm finally seeing what held it together." Daniel didn't respond. He just stepped back slightly, as if unsure whether to approach her or walk away. For the first time, they stood on opposite sides of something neither of them fully controlled. That evening, Eli received confirmation that the filing documents were ready. He placed them on the table without celebration. "Tomorrow morning," he said, "it becomes official." Mary felt her chest tighten. "And after that?" she asked. Eli looked at her steadily. After that, your father will receive notice. Theo sat beside her, quiet but alert. How do you want to handle the wedding timing? He asked gently. Mary hesitated. I don't know anymore, she admitted. The room fell silent for a moment. Then Eli spoke. You don't have to cancel your life to correct history, he said. Mary looked at him. It already feels like my life is the one being rewritten, she replied softly. No one answered immediately. Later that night, Mary received a call from her mother. Her voice was different this time, less controlled, more fragile. Mary, please, she said. Just slow down. Mary closed her eyes. I can't slow down something that already happened, she replied. Her mother paused. Your father is not sleeping, she said quietly. Mary stayed silent. Her mother continued, people are asking questions at the farm. Daniel is worried. Everything is becoming unstable. Mary answered softly, then maybe it was never stable. Her mother's voice cracked slightly. You don't understand what you're doing to him, she said again. Mary replied, I think I'm starting to understand what was done long before I ever got involved. The call ended shortly after. Early the next morning, Eli placed the final documents into a sealed envelope. This goes to the county office first, he said. Mary watched carefully. And then? She asked. Eli looked at her. Then your father is formally notified. Theo stood beside her. No more delays, he said quietly. Mary nodded, though her hands were tense. For a moment, she thought about stopping everything, about returning to the version of life where weddings and families stayed simple. But that version no longer existed. Do it, she said finally. Eli nodded once. The envelope was closed, and silence filled the room. Outside, the wind moved through the trees again, but this time it felt less like nature, and more like something finally beginning to shift. By midday, the formal notice had been filed at the county office. The process was no longer private. It now had a timestamp, a case number, and a visible trail that could not be quietly removed. Mary stood outside the building with Theo beside her as Eli finished the final submission steps inside. It's done, Eli said when he returned. His voice carried no pride, only acceptance. Mary felt strangely numb. So now it begins? She asked. Eli nodded. Now it is no longer in our hands alone. Theo watched Mary carefully. You're shaking, he said softly. Mary replied, I think I've been shaking for days. I just didn't notice until now. The wind moved through the street, colder than before. That evening, word had already begun to spread quietly through parts of the farming community. Nothing official was public yet, but people who knew how county systems worked understood what a filed challenge meant. Daniel called Mary again, this time more urgent. The bank is asking questions, he said immediately. They want clarification on the land status. Mary closed her eyes. Then they'll get clarification, she replied. Daniel's voice tightened. You don't understand how fast this can spiral, he said. Mary answered calmly, I think I finally understand exactly how slow it took to reach here. Daniel didn't respond for a moment. Then he said quietly, I don't know how to fix this. Mary replied, maybe it was never ours to fix alone. At Eli's house that night, silence sat heavily around the table. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, Theo broke it gently. Tomorrow will be the rehearsal dinner, he said. Mary looked up slowly. The reminder felt distant and unreal. I almost forgot, she admitted. Eli shook his head. You didn't forget, he said. You just stopped thinking in normal time. Mary let out a faint breath that almost sounded like laughter, but it wasn't joy. It was exhaustion. How do I stand in front of people tomorrow and act like nothing is happening? She asked. Theo replied softly, You don't act. You just stand. Eli nodded once. And let them see what truth looks like when it is no longer hiding. The next morning, Mary returned briefly to the hospice center to clear her head. Elder Musa was no longer there. He had passed days earlier, quietly, before the case had fully escalated. The room felt emptier than she expected. A nurse handed her a sealed envelope. "He asked that you receive this," she said. Mary opened it slowly. Inside was a short handwritten note. "Truth is not always for the past. Sometimes it is for the next person who will stand where you stood." Mary held the paper for a long moment. Theo stood beside her, reading it silently. "He knew this would happen," Theo said quietly. Mary nodded. "Or he knew someone would need to finish what he started." That evening, Mary prepared for the rehearsal dinner with a calm she did not fully understand. It was not peace. It was resolution forming slowly inside her. Eli adjusted his jacket in the hallway. "Once we enter that room," he said, "everything will shift again." Mary looked at him. "Will my father be there?" she asked. Eli nodded. "He won't stay away." Theo stepped closer. "Then we stay steady," he said. Mary took a breath. "No matter what happens?" she asked. Theo met her eyes. "Especially then." For the first time in days, Mary did not feel like she was chasing truth anymore. She felt like she was walking directly toward it, and there was no turning without leaving part of herself behind. The rehearsal dinner took place in the parish hall beside the church, a long room filled with folding chairs, soft lighting, and the quiet tension of a family pretending everything was normal. Mary entered with Theo and Eli beside her. Conversations softened as eyes followed them. Her father, Mr. Thompson, was already there, standing near the front table, greeting guests with forced calm. When he saw Eli, his expression tightened instantly. "You brought him here," he said under his breath as Mary approached. Mary replied calmly, "He came because the truth is already here." The room seemed to hold its breath. Daniel avoided eye contact, while her mother sat stiffly, caught between fear and silence. Dinner had barely started when Mr. Thompson stood up, tapping his glass. "Before we continue," he said loudly, "I want to make something clear." The room quieted. He looked directly at Eli. "Some people return when it suits them," he said. "Not when they are needed." Eli did not respond. Mary felt the tension rise instantly. Theo placed a steady hand near her chair but did not speak. Mr. Thompson continued, "Family is not something you walk in and out of when convenient." His voice carried control, but also strain. Mary slowly stood up. "Then maybe family should also be something you don't rewrite when it is inconvenient," she said softly. The room shifted immediately. A murmur spread through the hall. Mr. Thompson's face tightened. "You have no idea what you are speaking about," he said sharply. Mary replied, "I think I finally do." She reached into her bag and placed a sealed copy of the filed notice on the table. "This is now with the county," she said. The room went silent again. Daniel's head lifted in shock. Her mother's hands trembled slightly. Eli finally spoke. "This is not about revenge," he said calmly. "It is about correction." Mr. Thompson stepped forward. "You are destroying everything I built," he said. Mary met his eyes. "Or exposing what was never stable to begin with," she replied. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Mr. Thompson looked around the room, searching for support, but found hesitation instead. Even longtime family friends avoided his gaze. Daniel finally spoke quietly. "Is it true?" he asked. No one answered immediately. That silence itself became an answer. Her mother lowered her head, tears forming but not falling. Eli spoke again, softer this time. "Nothing here needed to be destroyed," he said. "Only corrected." Mary felt her chest tighten, not from anger anymore, but from exhaustion. She realized the truth was no longer hidden. It was simply present in the room, impossible to ignore, waiting for acceptance rather than permission. Later that night, after the guests had slowly left and the hall emptied into quiet, Mary stood outside the church with Theo and Eli. The wind moved gently through the trees, the same wind that had followed her since childhood. Her father had left without another word. No final argument, no closing sentence, just silence. Mary looked at the building where everything had shifted and exhaled slowly. "What happens now?" she asked. Eli answered, "Now people decide what kind of truth they want to live with." Theo held her hand firmly. Mary nodded, understanding at last that nothing would return to how it was. But something else had begun, something honest, uncertain, and finally unhidden. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to share what it reminded you of in the comments. Maybe a time someone opened a door for you when you needed it most. If you enjoyed the story, consider liking it so it can reach others who might need it, and subscribe for more true-to-life stories like this coming next week. Thank you for staying with me until the very end.